Several people have commented on YouTube at some point about wondering what all this stuff over here is, right? This side of the board. It's all the chapters in the book New Eyes that I wrote several years ago, which is a unifying vision of science and spirituality, right? So it's all the chapters in the book. So we have just finished the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, a series on every one of the steps of his Eightfold Path. And I thought it would be a good time to point out some of what those chapters are for people who don't know. And for others who have asked, I'd like to see some more of the science, you know? I'm heavy into the spirituality all the time, but what about some more of the science? So I'm going to weave some more back in by showing you some of the links between quantum physics, science in general, deep science, and what we just finished with the Eightfold Path. Now, this is from the Samadhi video a few weeks back, and what that was about was the Buddhist concept of what Samadhi is, and that in spite of being on a mountain, we'll just call it Chaos Mountain, a mountain of chaos, inside or on the mountain, there's a calm, cool, crystal clear blue lake. That's at the center of the mountain. And every one of us has that type of consciousness inside of us that is calm, cool, and collected. It's relief, it's crystal clear. It's actually the source of everything. It's the origin of everything, which is literally the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. Now, I'm not positive about this. I think I read some point, because I know Buddha was, when he was Siddhartha, was raised as a Hindu. I believe he studied some Taoism. It would make sense because Buddhists and Taoists both use the yin-yang as a symbol. So I'm pretty confident Buddha would have read the Tao Te Ching. I don't know for sure, but there's certain similarities, okay? So the first verse of the Tao Te Ching says, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. Well, there we go. What's the point of talking about any of this then, right? And what does that really mean? The concept of this lake that is at the center of each of our consciousness, if you will. Your most balanced self. Each of us has that. It's where we're all unified in that one exact spot. It's unnameable. It can't be described. It must be experienced. It reminds me directly of Morpheus talking to Neo in the Matrix. When Morpheus says, hey, I can't show you the Matrix. You must see it for yourself. No one can explain this to anyone else. It can't be done. The best we can do is point each other in the right direction, including how words always fall short. Whatever word you use it, we called it, Tao, God, Holy Spirit, Brahman, Allah, source, whatever. Who cares what you call it? The fact is it exists. It's the source and the ground of all being. It can't be named. And once it's named, we just lost it. Which is the second paragraph here. The Tao is both named and nameless. Well, there we go. What a contradiction immediately. As soon as you name it, you lose it, but it's both named and nameless. Well, what does that mean? It's exactly what we just got done talking about with Samadhi. It's same but different. That's the whole essence of it. It can be named after all. Well, that's interesting. That's because it's named in a way, approximation, if you will. Sort of. It's not fully the thing, but you can get close enough to make it useful. So it's named, but it's also still nameless. That's Samadhi. In the same way, as we talked about over here, in the same way that the E equals mc squared, which we'll do in a minute, that water is both, or H2O is both water and ice at the same time, and as the Buddha taught, that your observing self and the object of observation is actually the same but different. So in the same way, this idea of the Tao is same but different. It can be named, it cannot be named. It's a pretty tough concept, but at the same time, it's the entire point. You got to be able to grasp both of those things at the same time. That's non-duality, being able to see what exactly that means. It continues, as nameless, it is the origin of all things, which is to say, when you just consider this as the source, it's in essence the Big Bang. It's the origin of all things because all of this stuff on this mountain comes from this thing. If you call it God, in the beginning, God said, let there be light and created the world. Well, there you go, okay? If it's the Big Bang happened, then all the stuff showed up. And so as nameless, can't identify it, don't know what to say about it, can only experience it, it is the origin of all things. And as named, it is the mother of 10,000 things. Now, as soon as we start to call it something, we just brought it into this existence, and here we are having the experience of it. And yet this stuff that we're experiencing is it. Same thing, different form. To use just conventional religion kinds of ideas again too, the soul and the spirit and the flesh and all that kind of stuff, it's really the same thing, different form. For people who understand the Trinity or believe in the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, it's easily same and different at the same time. Yeah, it's all one thing, but then why did we just call it three things? Because it's both. That's the challenge. And getting to that and embracing all of that includes loving your enemy, because other people, while different than you, are the same as you. And we don't get to that spot, that experience of that type of peaceful lake inside ourselves, that calm, cool, collected lake. We can't get there unless we embrace others as ourselves. That's why Jesus' commandment is very clear. Love another as oneself. That doesn't make sense. Well, which part of this does make sense? Well, it all makes sense if you do what the Buddha taught here. It's all the same. That's why it makes sense. Because this is the origin of all things. It's the starting point, and this stuff shows up. And what's the journey? Realize that's where you come from. Then the last paragraph of this first verse. Ever desireless, one can see the mystery. That's straight up ego talk, okay? Because the ego desires all this flesh stuff. It has a specific attachment. Remember, verse number 1, or step number 1 of the Eightfold Path is the first noble truth that we all suffer, and we suffer because of attachments. That's desire. We don't get to see and experience this if we have all these expectations of fulfillment coming from the flesh. It won't happen. Ever desireless, you can see the mystery. However, ever desiring, one only sees manifestations. So as soon as we take on the ego and all the physical and focus on all the physical, we only see this stuff on the mountain. The monster, the bear, the trees, the snakes, the fires, all that stuff. We see other people on the mountain, but we don't see the source because we're still in the phase of desiring. And the mystery, let's do smaller. And the mystery itself is the doorway to all understanding. The mystery is the doorway to all understanding. You want to figure yourself out, figure everything out? It's the fact that it's the mystery. We're not going to be able to name one thing and say that's the answer. This mystery, the closing the gap, the unifying others with self, the embracing the fact that it all comes from source, that life and death are different but the same. Grasping that mystery pulls everything together. And that also puts you firmly in that lake. And that's the journey. It's a collective journey. All of us are doing it. All of us are on Mount Chaos, okay? So now we're going to dive straight into some of the science coming from the chapters of New Eyes, but of course I just pulled that from all the different wonderful teachers before us anyways, and we're going to talk about the first 7 chapters, and how it links to all of this. By starting with the words that I made up in Cito Veritas, that's what I call pig Latin. It's Latin, but I made it up. It's a phrase that I put together because to me it's inspire to incite truth. And the point of the book New Eyes is to help people see from my experience that science and religion are indeed compatible. And lo and behold, one of Einstein's best quotes, Einstein said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Now there's a great many people who say, "Oh, that's taken out of context. That doesn't mean what you think it means." And so I put Einstein context question mark. Some people say it means this. Some people say it means that. Okay, a bunch of people like to argue. I will say those words in my context, and I'm going to say the exact same words as Albert. Okay, the fact is, the way I see it is science without religion is lame, and religion without science is blind, and that's in context. I'm going to show you how. The whole idea of trying to grasp this, and well, how the heck am I supposed to do that? Well, once you understand the science, it's so much easier to do. What is the science doing? It helps you see. It helps you see exactly what's going on here and what is it that we're supposed to be doing. It helps you see. But what if there's science without any of the religion or the spirit or the philosophy behind it? Then it's all just meaningless. We live, we die, it's over, There's actually an ultimate point to it. Mixing the two together is elegant, okay? And so, going to mix them together. Chapter 2, literally organized chaos. There's a whole lot of neat science that goes into organized chaos chapter, okay? But the primary part of it is what our personal experience is as human beings. All of us experience chaos at some point in our lives, and for the most part, our emotions feel chaotic a lot of the time. I work with tons of addiction because people are trying to manage the emotional chaos in their lives. The world itself is extremely chaotic. Well, this is Mount Chaos. And guess what? On Mount Chaos, within what Mount Chaos is a very organized place. And it's an experience that all of us have where it all makes sense. And so it is organized chaos. That's our lives, but it's also samadhi. And the journey towards it is you're going to go through chaos, suffering, as the Buddha says, and then you're going to end up in this lake. Okay? So it is organized chaos. E = mc². Now, we referenced that a few times. And And I'm going to talk about it here in a slightly different way. I've mentioned it before. I did a video on this before. If you take E equals mc squared, which is Einstein describing how everything is the same, just like the Buddha and Samadhi and the right view and seeing that subject and object are actually the same, although they're different. Einstein said different manifestations of the same thing. Now watch this little mathematical trick, and I'm always open to some mathematician telling me I'm doing something wrong, okay? From my perspective, this is beautiful. You can see just how the universe works right here. E equals mc squared, energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. Light is essentially visible energy. And so on this side of the equation, you have non-physical stuff that you can't see. On this side, you have physical stuff or stuff you can see, right? Well, just like if I have 8 equals 2 times 4, that's true. And I take the 4 and I put it under the 8, 8 divided by 4 now equals 2. Same equation in different form. It's all true, right? Now let's just do the same thing with Einstein's famous equation. You take the c squared and you put it under the e. E divided by c squared equals m. Well, how do you take water and you make it solid? What do? You slow it down. If it vibrates less, water will become ice around 32 degrees, right? That's all it is. Faster H2O tends to be liquid. Really fast H2O is gaseous. But slow vibrational H2O is a solid, right? That's because you slowed it down. Well, take energy and slow it down. Slow it way down, because the speed of light squared is a really big number. Slow energy way down. What shows up? Mass. What do we specifically have here? Energy, the source of all matter, consciousness, all of that kind of stuff. That's a special kind of energy. Slow it way down, and the mountain shows up. So here we have E equals mc squared directly linked to this exact concept, okay? It's same but different. 4, atoms, vessels of light. Most people don't consider themselves to be a vessel of light. And yet our bodies are made up of atoms, trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms. And what are atoms made up of? Very loosely, this is an atom. It's made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons, right? And the electron itself absorbs light and releases light. That's what atoms do. Atoms are like little teacups. They take in something and then they can dump something out. Our bodies are made up of trillions and trillions of these things. I can only see you because your atoms are releasing light. You can see me because my atoms are releasing light. It's all vibration, and you can hear me for the same reasons, vibrations, okay? And so here I have a little atom, and literally they release light and they absorb light. That's what they do. That's why we are vessels of light. So here I have a stick figure human being. That's a physical body, but right next to it, I have it broken down into a bunch of little dots. If we saw each other as we actually are, we would see trillions and trillions and trillions of atoms. And we would understand, oh, we're vibration. We wouldn't think of ourselves as physically solid. But can you see right here how it's both? You are physically solid, and yet you're not. Sure, seems physically solid, and for all practical purposes you are. But you're really vibrations. And you're really a vessel of light, okay? And so quite literally, Jesus in Matthew 5:14 says, you are the light. He also said, I am the light. That means we are the light. That's what this light is. It's the light. So the light comes into being, that special kind of light, which you could call spirit. And again, who cares what word you use? It just is. It comes into being. Here we are. I'm looking at your spirit right now. I'm looking at your consciousness right now. You're looking at mine right now, but you're also looking at a body on top of it, right? Same thing, different form, right? And the goal is to say, no, my body doesn't have a soul. It is a soul, okay? And again, people use different words for that. Who cares? It's the experience of this that matters. That's the point. Let's not trifle over words. That's an issue. The Tao that we named is not the Tao. That's the whole point, is understand the essence and the teachings of this, okay? And so that's why we're vessels of light. Along comes Niels Bohr, chapter 5, in talking about balance. Niels Bohr, 100 years ago, had a concept called the complementarity principle, in which he talked about this world has no opposites. Using science, he demonstrated it. Why there are no opposites, it's just complements. Things are different extensions or different manifestations of each other. Simply put, things like height. You have tall and you have short, but short is just the absence of height. You know, you have fat and you have thin. Thin is the absence of fat, right? You have dark and you have light. Dark is the absence of light. And on and on and on. It's just a continuum of sameness. That's all it is. All of us are on a continuum of sameness. So you have ego, which is physical focus. Then you have spirit, which is spiritual focus. Same thing, different form. You have one mind, but two poles. We're going to do hermeneutics coming up soon, talking about the law of polarity and things like that. But here's the idea. It's all through all the different philosophies. The fact is, you have a choice in your life. You're either going to focus on yourself as a physical being, or as a spiritual being, or a combination, but you better unify the two at some point. And so most of us spend most of our life thinking ourselves physically, when in reality, we are spiritual beings. Now, you're not supposed to go off the rails and just go all spiritual either, but you do have to make yourself primarily spiritual, because that's what you all are eternally. What we are temporarily is physical. But now we got it in the right order, and now we have to be balanced in that process. Right? It's not supposed to go radically one way or the other. The healthy human being does what Jesus says in chapter 17, jumping way ahead. You are two, he says. When you are two, what will you do? Well, you were one. You came from one. And whatever's on that side of things, I don't know. But we all came from the one. And now we're in duality. Now we're two. Now you have a body, and now things are different. That's different than that. That's different than that. But it's all the same. That's how you restore the split mind, okay? By recognizing that indeed we are all one. Or as Krishna says, if you perceive the unity emanating from all beings, you will attain the infinite spirit. That just means my ability to look at you and you and you and you, and not just people, but circumstances and your emotions. And what we call bad, we don't need to cover that stuff up. Experience the bad, rejoice in your sufferings, okay? Because the bad is actually the other side of good. It's the same thing. Don't eat off the tree of good and evil. Eat off the tree of life. The tree of life is samadhi. It's recognizing that all of this works together. It's beautiful and exquisite. And the whole journey is to get the mind into the state where it understands that. And then it sinks, like the Buddha says, it's distanceless. It sinks from the head to the heart. And like a mirror, the universe will reflect it back to you that it's true. You get affirmed. It says that in scripture too. God himself will tell you, well done, my faithful servant. He'll affirm for you that you did it by joining these things together. You did it, okay? Now that's Hebb's law. Neuroscience works wonderfully well in this. We are set up to be able to practice things and get good at them and get addicted to them. But what do we usually get addicted to? If it's not substances, it's personality traits, right? It's emotional states, it's opinions, political ideas. You don't get to pick and choose which things you're going to see as the same. You have to see it as all the same. Again, quoting wonderful moment when Jesus was going to be crucified and Peter tried to stop it. And Peter said, no, they're not going to kill you. They can't kill our Savior. And Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. You're focused on the affairs of man. I'm focused on the affairs of God. Jesus was trying to demonstrate how to get back to this place by saying things like, look, I'm not dying. Haven't you learned that yet? No one can die. Death doesn't exist. And yet, Peter wanted to stop it because he thought Jesus was dying. And he's like, I'm not dying. In fact, I'll die and I'll come back, okay? Buddhism, of course, has reincarnation as part of the process as well. So death isn't what we think it is. We have to learn how to see death as the same as what life is, even though it's different, okay? And so what's Hebb's law? Practice makes perfect. If you practice English when you're 3 weeks old and then 3 months and then 3 years, you're going to get good at it. Practice French, you'll get good at that. Practice loving other people, you'll get good at that. Practice hating other people, you get good at that. Whatever you choose to focus on, all throughout the Eightfold Path, what you focus on becomes you, as Buddha says. You are what you've thought. So if you think you're separate from other people, you are. If you think you're unified with other people, you are. If you think you're bad, you are. If you think you're good, you are. If you think you are spirit, you are. If you think you are the light, you are. And the trick is we get lost and then we wake up to these truths and then we have a chance to practice it. Well, that's practice makes perfect. It's not easy to just wake up and go, oh, wait, love my enemies? All right. You got a lot of walking back to do. All of us do. You spend a lot of time hating on someone, learn how to love them can be challenging. Just like at my age to learn French would be challenging. But could I do it? Sure I could. Now that just takes focus, and thank goodness, thanks to Hebb's law, if you work at it, it'll work. Okay? Seek and you will find. Jesus never once said, seek and some of you will find. And seek and 1/3 of you or whatever. And the rest are going to hell. They didn't say stuff like that. Seek and you will find. You are the light. Now put those two things together. It's samadhi. And then we will end on relativity. Relativity, Einstein's science of the nature of the world that we're living in, that we, in essence, all have our own universe. We all think it's one universe, and yet we come at it from different angles. And so therefore, as he said, the time and the space of the universe is relative. It changes for each individual observer. And yet it's still all one, because Einstein said the light itself is constant. What a great metaphor for all of this. The light is constant, the physical stuff, the time and the space change, and yet the light remains constant. We're living in a universe where each one of us has our own perspective. Well, this is Mount Chaos. I drew some extra people. This person comes at the lake from the north. This one comes from the southwest. This one from the southeast. And this one from the east. Okay? So they all had, it's relative. But are they all finding their way back to the lake? Yes, whether they know it or not. Buddha, one of his first teachings was that we all have our own path. So this person would come from here to the lake, this one from here, here, here. And we're not talking about north and south, of course. We're talking about relative experiences. What did you experience? What did you get taught? Did you get taught Judaism? Did you get taught Islam? Did you get taught that those people are bad because? Or did you get taught those people can be loved because? And if you could walk anyone's history back, months ago I talked about Madame de Stael, the French philosopher, who said, if you understood all, you'd forgive all. Well, that's illustrated by Mount Chaos. If you understand just this, everyone is lost on Mount Chaos somewhere. Agreed? We all have different things to figure out. Sure. We all have biases to work through and prejudices. Sometimes against others, sometimes against ourselves. Everyone's got the same sort of stuff going on. It's chaos. And yet, everyone has to find their way back to the lake. That's relativity, because it's the light that's constant. The one thing that we all have in common, as Jesus made clear in Matthew 5:14, is the light. Our duty is to learn how to find that light, be the light, as he said. Don't hide the light, express the light. Be that light, just like the Buddha said, you are also Buddha. All of us can return to the source. And at that place, we realize we are the light of the world.